Hey, thanks for clicking on this episode of Puck Buds. A bit of a disclaimer before it starts. We recorded this on Monday night as the news of the Alex Pietrangelo Vegas signing became public. We talk about it a bit at the end, as we found out in real time, but there's a couple references to him signing elsewhere earlier in the episode. Yeah, we know he can't sign in Boston after signing in Vegas, but how about a sign-in trade? Anyways, roll the clip.
Back to Torey Krug halfway through overtime.
Now they even had a set play on that face-off win, but Krug didn't get much on it on the indirect pass to Marshall.
Krug takes the ice, goes right down the slot, and scores! The Bruins scored 2 goals with the goalie pulled in 48 seconds at the end of the third, and Torey Krug returns to deliver triumph.
You just heard Jack Edwards' call from November 23rd of 2019 when Torey Krug went end-to-end in overtime to defeat the Minnesota Wild on a night where number 47 had 3 points. Of course, Krug is now a member of St. Louis after signing on Friday. I think most expected him to leave Boston, but still, as a fan of the team and him, it was pretty hard to take. Welcome to Puck Buds, everyone. Not exactly a free agency special, since if we talked about every move, we'd be here for a week. So instead, we'll keep it to Krug and the, I think safe to say, we'll get into it, I think bizarre Taylor Hall Sabres signing. I know I got some thoughts on that. I was a little bit confused. I can't speak for Dylan. We'll hear from him later, but after the Hall and Krug talk, we'll get into some smaller moves that we liked, others that we didn't. No headlines this week since we have about 1.5 million to pick from. So let's just dive right into it. As I just mentioned, St. Louis landed one of the biggest fish in the 2020 free agency pond with a 7-year, $6.5 million per deal for the former Bruins power play quarterback. 67 goals and 270 career assists for Krug, which includes 2 trips to the Stanley Cup Final. He signed as an undrafted free agent after 3 years with Michigan State, and after just 3 regular season games in 2011 and 2012, Krug was inserted into the lineup on the Bruins' 2013 Cup run. Dylan talked about it on an episode previously, and he delivered 6 points in 15 games, which includes 4 goals. The rest, as they say, is history. At least Bruins history. But look, free agency is part of the game. Guys come and go all the time. But Krug is a different player. Every time that guy stepped on the ice, he gave 110%. He played with more guts, more determination, and more balls than any Bruins player I've seen in my entire life. And by all accounts, he was a class act and one of the leaders in the locker room. And all this doesn't even include the fact that he's a really, really good hockey player. Like I said, the quarterback for the best power play in the league for the past 3 years, at least the past 3 years. Krug was an elite stretch passer, creating scoring chances throughout his time in the black and gold. And without Krug, do you see the numbers that Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak have put up these last 3 years either? Who knows? I figured he wouldn't come back to the Bruins, but that was sort of when the rumors were swirling around that he wanted upwards of $7 million. But when I saw that he signed for 6.5, and the team that I saw that he signed with, since most figured they'd want their own top flight defenseman, Alex Pietrangelo, back, it kind of felt like a gut punch. Krug said in his exit interview that the Bruins made him an offer, but it was a year ago. And obviously, that was before all of the pandemic stuff happened and the league went to a flat cap. So they hadn't made an offer since, and even then that offer was reported to be 6.5, which is what he's signed for now. So it's pretty clear that this guy wasn't in their plans moving forward beyond 2020. And frankly, it's a little bit puzzling why. I understand if they didn't want to pay him 7.5, 8 million, like was reported that he wanted on the open market. Look, the Bruins don't have they have cap room, but they don't have enough for that, and they have a bunch of other holes. But the fact that the Blues signed him when they still lost their captain and their defenseman, and the Blues were able to get him, it just like, I mean, had he gone to Detroit like everybody thought he was going to? One of the big the one that where people speculated he'd go to. He's from Detroit. They had a lot of money. Fine, that's good. But the Blues, I don't know. So, Dylan, this segment might turn into a bit of a group cry, at least for me. But what do you got on the deal? Do you think the Bruins should have maybe made a stronger push to keep him based on that 6.5 a year? And how do you think he'll do in St. Louis? I'll just give the floor to you.
So obviously, between the two of us, you're the more diehard Bruins fan specifically, but even for myself, it kind of hit home for me because I just think Torey Krug is the perfect Bruin. And you look at, people know me as somebody who's pretty analytical. I typically go by the numbers, but everything Torey Krug brings as a total package goes well beyond the numbers. And I like how you mentioned kind of the electricity factor when he's on the ice. I mean, you can just see how quick his legs are moving. Obviously in great condition, never runs out of energy. He has that hit from the, Game 2 of the Cup final?
Game 1 against Robert Thomas. Did you see the tweet? Did you see
did. That was
like
funny.
I mean, that was like you rip your heart out and just stomp on it a few times.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's like, even as someone who's not necessarily a diehard Bruins fan, it still kind of hurts me just knowing that it sounds like, for whatever reason, internally, they were never even that close. And
well, they never give him an offer.
I don't know if you got that sense, but
totally. They never gave him that offer.
And you mentioned, you used the word puzzling, and that's kind of what I don't get either, because they seemed so set on not moving forward with Torey Krug. Apparently a while ago, they were that set on it, and I just don't get. Obviously they know things I don't, but what could the reason possibly be to be that 100% dead set on not wanting Torey Krug? I just don't quite understand. I think he'll do well in St. Louis. I think he's joining a solid offensive decor with Parayko and Falk. I mean, those are two good offensive defensemen. I think he'll do well. I think the Blues will have some success. It is kind of weird that they have stacked their blue line with predominantly offensive guys.
Well, Parayko's pretty solid in his own end.
He's a good defenseman. He's
a really good defenseman.
Yeah, he's a good scoring defenseman, but you're right that he doesn't do that in a way that prohibits him from playing good D. So, yeah, I think overall St. Louis has a solid team next year. I mean, Justin Falk probably signed for, in hindsight, more than what they wish they gave him, but
definitely.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the more surprising ones, I guess you could say. Not necessarily surprising that he got traded, but to see him going to the team he did at the amount that he ultimately took.
Yeah, it's puzzling. I don't get why the Bruins wouldn't try to make a move to get him back. Like, I understand that the Bruins have some holes that they need to address, and they addressed it, some of them with the Carson Smith signing. But now, by letting Krug go, it's not like 6.5 is anything unreasonable. I mean, I don't think so. I think he's a 6.5 defense, but I understand the concern with signing him long term since he's 29, and by the end of the deal, he'll be, 36? Pat on the back for some quick mental math. But it seems like he had a really good role on the Bruins, and he was one of the reasons why the strength of their team was undoubtedly their power play. I don't think there's anybody that would argue that. And your quarterback, he's the guy on the power play. He's your quarterback. He's the guy that's calling the plays, getting everybody the puck. Does Brad Marchand and David Pastrnak make him better? Oh, of course. But does Torey Krug make them better too? Absolutely. It's like sort of the argument that is Ovi as good without John Carlson and vice versa? And I would say both of those guys are elite players, but without one or the other, I don't know if they're as good. And I think that's the same thing with Krug. So I think now you have a big hole, not only on the power. Well, I should go back. I think they're going to be able to fill the holes on the power play. I think either Matt Grzelcyk or Charlie McAvoy are going to be able to do a serviceable job, and the Bruins are still going to have a good power play. But it's no longer the strength of your team. And now you have a major hole in your top four. The Bruins have a lot of NHL defensemen, but they don't have NHL defensemen that eat a lot of ice. I mean, you got McAvoy, who just said, and then Brendan Carlo. So I like Matt Grzelcyk. I do. I think he can play with McAvoy, but McAvoy or Grzelcyk, Chara as your top two on the left side, I don't know about that. So I know why they didn't re-sign him, but it's like if he's only getting 6.5, I don't know why they didn't make more of an attempt to bring him back. Maybe Don Sweeney thought that he had Oliver Ekman-Larsson in the bag, or he's got some more tricks up his sleeve to get a good defenseman. But to just, I mean, when I saw the deal, I was like, really? For 6.5? Why couldn't they get that done? It was confusing. I didn't really understand it.
I feel like there's something we don't know. I think.
What do you mean?
Well, I think professional sports, there's a dynamic between the teammates and the ownership and the players, and I just feel like for some reason something inside of me tells me that their inability to come together and make a deal equivalent to what he got in St. Louis, it makes me think that maybe something happened internally. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to speculate. This isn't my area, but it's just a very strange situation. And, I think that it's funny because if you look throughout the Bruins' history, they don't like writing those big checks.
No.
And you know what? I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. They're yet to sign a player in their history over 7.25. That's David Krejci. Krejci makes 7.25, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's exactly
He's
right.
currently the highest paid player on the team, also the highest paid Bruin of all time. Look, I'm not encouraging anyone to throw $11 million at very many guys at all. But you look at the other big markets. You look at Toronto. I mean, don't do what they do. Trust me, don't do what Toronto does. But they sometimes they make those big splashes. Montreal does it. New York signed Panarin for over 11. Chicago has Kane and Taves at 10 each. And, the Bruins, for the most part, their management has done things the right way. But I think at some point, I'm just curious, when are they going to make this big splash and sign somebody that is one of those premier names out there in the NHL? Because it seems like every single time their name is in the conversation, and then it kind of never comes to fruition.
Yeah, well, it always makes sense for them to sign these big guys. I mean, just look back at the sweepstakes. There were rumors that they were in on Steven Stamkos. There were rumors that they were in on John Tavares. There were rumors that they're in on Taylor Hall. And then they just don't pull the trigger. And I understand being a little bit cautious, but you just lost a really important piece and a really key contributor on the Cup run last year. And what are you going to do to replace him? Because like I said, the strength of their team, I'm not necessarily sure is going to be their strength of the team next year. Now, I think that I believe they have $12 million in cap space after signing Craig Smith, and I think that's enough money where you can get some guys to, I guess, get a new strength of the team. I think going after Mike Hoffman or Evgeny Dadonov would be a really good move. I think both those guys, you can play them in lines 1 through 3. And one of the big problems for the Bruins was that they couldn't score Their top six couldn't score 5-on-5, and Cassidy was really handcuffed with being able to switch around the lines. Now you got Craig Smith, which I think is a great signing. He's pretty big. He's a guaranteed 20 goal scorer, and he shoots a lot. So if you were to get another guy, a left-handed shot, a Hoffman or Dadonov, that means that all lines 1 through 3, you can rotate them now, and you can find a matchup that you really like. And I think that becomes a strength. But right now, just with Craig Smith into the top 6, that's not a strength. That's not a strength with DeBrusque, Krejci, Kasha on line 2, and then Bjork, Coyle, and Smith. I don't think that's going to beat good teams. I think, like I said, if you add another guy to that mix, then I think it becomes a really, really good unit. But right now, it's not. Your power play got worse. Your top 4 got worse. So I just don't understand why they wouldn't sort of spend the money. I mean, they have money to spend. They can get a good player. So I just don't, unless there's something coming. Unless there's something coming down the line. But right now, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
See, first of all, I like what you said about the risk regarding Torey Krug, because I certainly understand a team being hesitant to sign a defenseman approaching 30 years old. What is he, 29 or 30?
Yep, 29.
I understand why you wouldn't want to give a huge long-term deal to a guy who's near 30, especially if he's a defenseman that relies on speed and quickness. But,
Yep.
I mean, look, I understand that, and I understand a bad contract. I mean, those can really hamper a franchise, no question about it. Watching some of those deadweight contracts like Bobby Ryan on the Senators, who just got signed by Detroit, sometimes those don't end up too well, and that can cause a headache in the future. But what's a bigger headache, dealing with a tough contract down the road, or now they have to replace? Well, they kind of have to change a solid chunk of their team, because Torey Krug, I mean, a lot of it revolved around him and what he offered, because not many defensemen offered what he seems to be able to bring to the table. And to me, it's I'm trying to play devil's advocate by saying, yeah, I understand why people would be hesitant to sign anybody approaching 30 to a long-term deal, but I just think Torey Krug's done everything you can ask of him. He was undrafted. I like that, too. I like the fact that the Bruins were the team that gave him a chance, that saw something in him, played a year in the minor leagues for Providence, came up through the system, ended up being a spectacular player at the NHL level. But, yeah, I think they put themselves in a position where they were afraid to take a risk, but now I'm starting to think, well, maybe the risk was not signing him.
Yeah. Look, I know, I get it too, the risk of signing him, but Torey Krug has proven throughout his career that he is extremely good when he has a defenseman that is strong in their own end, that is a defensive defenseman. Mm-hmm. Now, I think it would be a huge risk if a team signed him to be their number one and play 28 minutes a night. Now, that wasn't going to be the case with Boston. The Bruins' number one defenseman, without question, is Charlie McAvoy. And I think the Blues, why I like this move for them, is because they have Colton Parayko. Colton Parayko is a number one defenseman in the NHL. So that's why I think the Bruins shouldn't have been hesitant, and why I really do like this move for St. Louis. I think that he's an upgrade on the power play from Alex Pietrangelo. Obviously, he's not. He's a downgrade defensively, but if you play him with Parayko, they'll be fine. And overall, the unit isn't taking that much of a hit, since it's already pretty good, and you're big up front, so you'll be able to body teams and push them off the puck and the whole 9 yards, things you can do with a big physical team.
St. Louis, they signed Justin Falk to that big ticket last summer, and they've gotten a lot of flack for that. A lot of people have said that kind of handcuffed them in signing Pietrangelo. I mean, yeah, it probably did. I mean, I don't think they're going to get Pietrangelo back, especially
no way.
I mean, I don't even think
he's gone.
It's not even on the table after signing Krug. But yeah, I think after all this, I mean, yeah, they gave him $6.5 million of cap space, but I think this is a good signing for St. Louis.
I do too. So there is one move that I think the Bruins should make that you talked about him a little bit earlier, highest cap hit in franchise history. and I want to bring this up. I think it's time to trade David Krejci. I mean, 7.5. If you add the 7.5 to 19 to the 12 that they have, it's about 19.5 million. You can get it up to 20. That I would have liked them to make that move before Krug signed, before Taylor Hall signed. But look, you can replace David Krejci in-house. Charlie Coyle can easily be a second-line center. Easily. That guy is really, really good. And then you have Trent Frederick in the minors. He's 21. He's big. He's physical. 32 points in 59 games last year. 140 penalty minutes. So it's pretty old-time hockey. And if he can't play, he's 20. He's 21, like I just said. So that's about the time where you want to start seeing these prospects come up. Used I believe a first-round pick on him not too long ago, and if he plays a third line, then Coyle plays a second, and you have all that cap space. Now, if he can't, Corrali can play the third line, and then Lindholm can play the fourth. That's not the worst case scenario. It's not the worst thing in the world. Lindholm can kill penalties, and you open up the cap space. And even if Trent Frederick can't play in the NHL, you have John Beecher, who's going to be a sophomore at Michigan, who they took in the first round last year, who's an absolute beast. And all that counts is that he's going to be able to make the jump in the and be a serviceable NHL player. So I think the move is trading Krejci, opening up that cap space, and then, I don't know, maybe a Johnny Gaudreau, maybe another another defenseman, and then maybe Alex Pietrangelo. Why not? If you have the money, why don't you do it? So I don't think they're going to, because that seems a little bold and out there, but that would be the move right now, because if they just leave it as is, your team got worse. And I don't think trading Krejci is going to make the team that worse. So
yeah,
those are just my spitballing. But with that, let's move on to the guy that the Bruins didn't sign. He was rumored that he could be headed there, but I believe it was Sunday night, sort of out of nowhere. Taylor Hall inked a 1-year deal with the Buffalo Sabres for $8 million. My initial response is what? What do you mean? What do you mean 1 year, $8 million with Buffalo? What? This guy, in his career, he came into the league in 2010. I think he's played for the 4 saddest franchises in the NHL in that time. I mean, he goes from Edmonton to New Jersey to Arizona to Buffalo. Can you think of a sadder organization? I mean, I guess the Leafs, but at least the Leafs made the playoffs a lot. Like, who?
I'm calling it now. He signs a big ticket in Ottawa next season.
I mean, seriously. It's like Ottawa's next. And he said on multiple occasions, that he wants to go to a winner. So if Hall wants to go to a winner, why doesn't he sign a short-term deal with a winning team? Or if he wants long-term stability, which most guys, especially at Hall's age, want long-term stability, he can go to somewhere with a lot of cap room, and that'll sign him for a long time. I don't know. Detroit comes to mind. You just said Ottawa. They'd be able to do it. But why? Why did he go to Buffalo? What? I mean, I get it, kind of. Like a little bit for both sides. But what? Do you get it?
No. Given all that, I don't want to. Yeah, I'd just like to get a firm no out there first to make it as clear as possible. Yeah, no. In one word, no. But I don't understand it. But it's just with everything, with all the criteria he gave us, which was that he was looking for a winner, which is not something he only said recently, but this is something he said for a while now, for years now. He wants to go to a winner. But by saying that and ultimately signing with Buffalo, all the hours of speculation that all the fans and analysts around the league and around the world did about where Taylor Hall was going to go, it was all for nothing. Because everybody was talking about Colorado, Boston, New York, all these big teams that are already contenders, because that's what he said he wanted to do. So people spent hours of their time speculating, having friendly conversations, discussing on the air on a podcast like I'm doing now, whatever. And it was all for nothing because he completely just threw all of his initial criteria away and signed with not a winner, but perhaps the biggest established loser in the NHL. and I am really interested to see how this team will play out because this is a construction to a team. The current state of the Buffalo Sabres, it's like they have two prized possessions, and then, I mean, I don't even want to use the word top heavy. This is beyond top heavy. I don't even know where to start with this team, and I guess I have listened to a couple different opinions on how it would make a little bit of sense for both parties, and I mean, I understand Hall kind of, from what I heard, maybe his thought process was he wanted to go to a place that could give him money for this year, and hopefully during this 1 year, he also wanted to play in a place where he could put up maximum points for his contract that he's going to sign next year. So his thought process is, okay, I'm going to play with Jack Eichel, probably help my stock, and if worse comes to worse, I still get $8 million this year. But I don't know, for someone who's
no, hold on. I gotta interject a little bit. I mean, if worse comes to worse, he absolutely does not get $8 million. No way. If worse comes to worse,
if they don't even play.
No. If he, I mean, look, his reputation, at least I think, is starting to take a little bit of a hit. People are starting to be like, wait a minute, this guy's a little bit overrated. I mean, he went to Arizona, didn't help him win. Fringe playoff team, got bounced by Colorado. Okay, Colorado was way better, but they didn't even put up a fight. New Jersey, they went to the playoffs his first year. He won the Hart, and then they sunk. The ship sunk, and he was on it. And now, so if Buffalo stinks, and they don't make the playoffs, and he stays the whole year, because I still think there's a possibility that they stink and they trade him. So, but if he stays the whole year and they don't make the playoffs, they finish like 10th or 11th, and the flat cap stays, there's no way he's making $8 million next year. No way. He's like, I think he just set himself up for a nut up or shut up year when he really didn't have to. Like, if he wanted to win and make the playoffs, because if you do it in the playoffs, it doesn't matter what you did in the regular season, you're going to get a lot of money. But if he doesn't make the playoffs, people are gonna be like, look, Taylor Hall's a loser. He could be all the talent in the world, but he doesn't elevate his game to how talented he is, and we're not gonna give him $8 million. So it seems like at the worst case, I think he's really, I think the signing is pretty high risk for him. I really do.
Oh, I think it's very high risk, and I mean, look, I agree with everything you're saying. I was just playing devil's advocate for a second. To me, I was just trying to point out any kind of a reason at all why he might have wanted to do this, because obviously there was some reason, but I mean, people have been talking about the Sabres as the team that's just really not even that close. And if you look at Ottawa, I mean, yeah, they're pretty bad. They're really bad. But
I think they're about to be a unit.
Like Brady Tkachuk and Thomas Chabot in place. And to me, I see, as bad as they are, I see them ahead of Buffalo. And me too. To me, it's just, in addition to their place in the standings the last really 10 years, what about Buffalo is attractive? I mean, like Eichel, he got drafted there. You know, he
so did Rasmus Dahlin. So
and yeah, I mean Skinner, obviously he signed a big ticket there. That was probably mainly because they were just giving him 3 times as much as everybody else was.
That would be what's attractive about Buffalo.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's like what you said about Hall's reputation starting to take a hit. I wanted to touch on as well. I mean, at a certain point, if you're the best player on teams that continuously don't make the playoffs, whether it's your fault or not, you will eventually have that loser tag pinned on you. And that's kind of just the way it goes. And I think Hall is, I won't say he's developing kind of a snake reputation, but I mean, what first overall pick is on 5 teams in 10 years or 4 teams in 10 years?
That's a good question. And I mean, he's not going to the playoffs. So I understand, like, if you're the best team on a bad team, like if you're Jack Eichel, like no one's gonna say, okay, Jack Eichel's a loser. Buffalo's been a dumpster fire. But if you're Taylor Hall and you didn't win in Edmonton, you didn't win in New Jersey, you didn't win in Arizona, and then you didn't win in Buffalo, what GM is going to be jump to the front of the line to give you $8 million for a long-term deal? It just seems like he bet on himself, and I don't think 30-year-olds that have played for as many different teams as he has should bet on themselves. I think they should take safe deals. I mean, saw it with Krug, 6 years at 6.5. I bet he could have held out and gotten 1 or 2 years at 7.5, but no, he took the safe bet because he's reaching the pinnacle of his game. And for Taylor Hall to take 1 year at 8, I just don't get it.
And I think the best way to sum it up is the way you said it, in that he put himself in what is now a huge contract year when I kind of don't think he needed to, and I think he kind of was already just coming off one of those. I thought last year was his contract year, but apparently he just wants to do it again. And Buffalo, it's definitely not a place you think of rental signings. You know, when I think of a top-tier rental player signing somewhere
with a good team,
I think of them either signing down in Florida, where it's just super nice weather, or on an immediate contender that they could possibly help win a cup this year.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this just does not fit that criteria in the slightest. We'll see how it plays out, but for the time being, this is definitely one of the biggest head-scratchers in recent memory for me.
Yeah, me too. I mean, if you're Buffalo, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to appease Eichel? If you're trying to do that, why wouldn't you sign him for longer than just 8 years? Or longer than just 1 year, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, and if you're not good, do you really think Taylor Hall is going to all of a sudden push you into the playoff hunt? Because I don't. I mean, you still got plenty of holes in the roster. And if he does go off, best case scenario for Hall, if he goes off with Eichel, then you have to bid with other teams. And do you want to go back to the losing Buffalo Sabres franchise? Or do you want to go to a contender that's offering you a lot of money? I mean, he's just going to go. And I mean, it's not like he's going to say, I'm going to stick around and work this out. I mean, he had that opportunity with Arizona. He didn't do it. Granted, Arizona doesn't have a lot of money, so maybe that's not a fair comparison. But I don't know. So, I mean, I guess the only reason I would think Buffalo would want to make this deal is if they stink, they can just trade them and get some draft picks back. I mean, honestly, that's the only real, I guess, benefit I see. Maybe that's not being fair, but I don't know.
Well, you mentioned even if it works out, let's say he has a great year. I mean, they're still not going to make the playoffs, most likely.
Probably not.
Even if he gets 100 points, the odds of them still making the playoffs are very slim. And so let's say he has a great year. Now they're just in a bidding war. And let's not forget, there's this guy named Rasmus Dahlin who's up next year.
Yep.
And look, I know they have cap space, but Dahlin's going to eat up a good chunk of that. And he deserves it. I mean, he's a good young defenseman. I don't think Dahlin has lived up to what people thought he would be so far.
Hard to in that situation.
Exactly. He's still going to be, we're going to be talking about him for a while as one of the top tier D, and he's young. They're going to be tempted to give him a big ticket, but they could also be in a bidding war for Taylor Hall at that point. So
yeah, and
we'll
it's
see what happens with this organization as a whole.
Yeah, it's like if he goes off, you're really going to be like, okay, Taylor, now you're going to take a pay cut so we can sign Dahlin. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Buffalo playing for the Sabres, that's not really a place where you're going to want to take a pay cut just so the team can be better.
Well, even if the team was good, you think Hall's going to be like, yeah, I'm effed. I just got 100 points. I'll go down to 6.5, 7, so you can sign other guys. I mean, maybe, but that doesn't really. He signed for 8 this year, so if he has a career year, if he has his 2018, 2017 year with New Jersey.
Yeah.
You really think he's going to be like, okay, I'll take a pay cut?
Let's just put it this way. Let's just put it this way. As a GM, you are setting yourself up for huge failure if you expect your guys to take pay cuts.
Yeah, exactly.
There's only a select few guys in the NHL that, maybe they've already made their money, maybe they're just raised a certain way, but
Or if you
really,
sign with a new team.
yeah, most of them aren't too willing to take pay cuts if this is their big moneymaker contract, and that's it makes sense.
Yeah. All right, so now let's move into sort of some moves that over the past few days that I've liked. Moves I didn't. Won't go into nearly the depth that we did with Taylor Hall and Torey Krug, but I think we should just touch on them. The first move that I like, that I don't know if other people are going to like, so I'm really interested to hear your opinion, is the move for Ryan Murray. Ryan Murray, obviously the 2012 number 2 overall pick. I think he's been, based on that pick, he's certainly been a disappointment. But he's not a bad player. He's not a bad player. He's big, physical, blocks some shots. Yes, he's got a big ticket. $4.6 million. That's a lot. But he's up at the end of next year. The Devils aren't a team that's in win now mode. There's not going to be any pressure to get into the playoffs, to get into the second round, third round. So really, it's sort of like an audition. But at the same time, you got to think that the Devils will be better than they were this year. So if Murray plays well, either he can cash in or the Devils can re-sign him. Because I think it's a real opportunity for Murray because he doesn't have the pressure of playing for the organization that took him number 2 overall. And the Devils didn't have to give up all that much to get him. So I think it's a fresh start for New Jersey. And I think he's a good player. And I think that people sort of or say that he's overrated because he went number 2 overall. But I think he's a good player, and I hope he does well in New Jersey.
I think that'll be an interesting one. He's actually a very solid defenseman.
Yeah,
Just
he
that
is.
He has that number 2 overall tag pinned on him. But if you remove that, and if you look at him for what he is, and you watch him play a game just by the eye test, or you look at his stats, I've even heard his underlying numbers are pretty good. If you look at all that, he's a very solid shutdown defenseman that I think he's the type of guy that gets overlooked because he's kind of a defensive D. But I mean, geez, any decent coach out there, any decent GM, they know how much those guys are worth. And I was very surprised to see him go for, what was it, a fifth
round pick? Like, are you kidding?
I know he's gonna. Over in Columbus, Jarmo Kekalainen is one of the most aggressive GMs out there. But I mean, this is something. This is something else. Kekalainen obviously has something up his sleeve, but it's hard for me to really see what his plan is when he just traded Ryan Murray for a 5th round pick.
Yeah,
so
yeah. It's clearly.
I think it's a great trade for
New Jersey
though.
Yeah. Well, it's clearly a salary cap dump. And New Jersey's got a lot of salary cap, but I think you got a good player for not a lot of money. Or not, I shouldn't say not a lot of money because he's a lot of money. I think you got a good player for not a lot of value back. And I think that New Jersey's going to be happy with Murray. So one of the moves I have that I said is a bad move, and not for either the player or the team. So it's a little bit of a out of left field one. I have Bobby Ryan to Detroit. So, like I said, not a bad move for Detroit. Definitely not a bad move for Bobby Ryan. It's a bad move for good teams. Ryan's value shrunk for reasons that had nothing to do with his play on the ice. I mean, obviously there was a public battle with alcoholism, and Ottawa has been absolutely brutal since they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that's easy for a guy to get in a rut and not play well. But Ryan was a top 5 pick when he was drafted. He has the ability to score, and he's looking for, like sort of what I was saying with Ryan Murray, is I think he needs a fresh start. So if you're a team like the Bruins, for example, that needs middle 6 scoring, you're not going to sign Bobby Ryan for $1 million a year? Are you kidding me? Why not? Why not? I mean, if the guy stays healthy, he's a guaranteed 45, 50 point scorer, and you're getting him for $1 million, and you could spark something being on a new team. But you're not going to do that. I think every team that's a elite team that's looking for another guy to push them over to the Stanley Cup should have made a move for Ryan. I think that when I saw that he signed with Detroit, I just thought it was like a huge wasted opportunity for every single contending team in the league to get a cheap scorer, because when you have a guy whose value shrinks for nothing to do with on the ice, for his play on the ice, that's when you have to pounce. I'll correct myself. For stuff that doesn't have to do with attitude issues, he's not getting arrested. He's not doing stupid things over and over. His battle was public. By all accounts, he was able to win it, and that was sort of the reason why his value shrunk. And I think that teams should have pounced on him for that, and I think that they're gonna really regret it.
Yeah, Bobby Ryan, he would have gone first overall in a lot of drafts, actually. I don't know if he went behind Sidney Crosby. He was the second overall pick. And for a while, going back to his junior days, he's been an unbelievable player at the NHL level. I think a lot of his struggles are, as you were kind of saying, almost in a way fabricated and almost enabled by the media. I think sometimes people have painted him in a bad light, when in reality, if you look at his numbers, at the very worst, he's going to get you 40 points.
Yeah.
If he's healthy.
Totally.
That's with anybody. It's a big if they're healthy. But for $1 million, the Bruins signed Joakim Nordstrom last year for $1 million, and how many points did he put up? Like 10.
Well,
he's a good player. Different player.
I don't want to trash Nordstrom. I can't sit here and let you do that.
But,
I should say.
No, I mean obviously the point of what I'm saying is $1 million. It can get you some decent value in the NHL, but usually not in scoring.
Yeah.
Here it could have been a potential easy 40 points for a very reasonable price. Guys like Joakim Nordstrom, they absolutely have their value, and you see them on Stanley Cup teams. But typically, that $1 million price point does not come with scoring.
Yeah. There are $1 million players, and then there are not $1 million players. There are guys that get more. Bobby Ryan is not a $1 million player. He gets more than that. That's the reason he signed that ridiculous contract in the first place, because he's good. So I is just like, what are you doing, other GMs? But another good moves I have is Colorado. Colorado made some moves that I really liked.
They made some great moves.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were great moves too. They were rumored to get Taylor Hall. So, when I saw that, I said, no. You don't need more firepower. You need more snarl. You need more veteran leadership. You need guys that have won. So who you get? You get exactly that. And Brendan Saad, he's big and he's a veteran. And then you had to trade Zadorov for him, but you replace him with Devin Taves, another good defenseman, and the Islanders needed to shed that salary. So that's why they were willing to give him up. So I think that's two great moves by the Avs. And now, oh my God, their defense is so good.
Yeah, their defense, we know who it starts with. Starts with Cale Makar. They also re-signed Adam Graves. I believe that was today or yesterday. He led the league in plus-minus last year. That's another good, solid defenseman. That really, for them, it makes three young, top-tier elite defensemen in the NHL. I wouldn't call Graves an elite defenseman yet.
Had a pretty damn good year.
Yeah, you got Gerard, Makar, Graves. Think of how many.
Don't forget about Bowen Byram either.
Oh, yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yep, upcoming.
Yep.
Think of the teams that would, think of a team like Buffalo. Think of what they would do to have three defensemen across the board like that. That, from what it looks like, they want to be there. Makar seems to, I'm sure I can't say I'm sure, but, you got to think that these three defensemen, the young top-tier defensemen that they have, are going to, they see them as part of their core for a while moving forward. I just really like where this organization, particularly Joe Sakic, has put themselves. And yeah, You mentioned the defense. They also got Andre Burakovsky back.
Yep.
They signed him
Yep.
to
I
2 years,
did forget that
2 years
one.
at 9.8.
Yep.
Yeah,
Really good
I
move.
really love the direction of this Colorado team, and I think with how it stands right now, I think this is the team to beat for the foreseeable future. I think they could potentially go on. I'm not saying they win
Not
3 or 4
guaranteeing them a
cups, but
cup
I'm
is what you're
saying
saying.
they could have one of those, maybe Bruins from 2010 to 2020
Yep.
decades, where every year they're up there. They might not be the best, but I think every single year for the foreseeable future, in September or October, we're going to be looking at them and saying, wow, this could be the team that really makes a good run into the playoffs.
They certainly will have a target on their backs because I mean this roster is unreal. I mean it's unreal, and I just love those moves. I do. I love that they didn't go. They didn't get. Oh, decide to go. I love that they didn't decide to go flashy, because
I agree.
they have money. They have money to spend, and they did it. And they made smart investments in good players who fill the roles that they need.
Yep.
So I think Colorado's like they were this year. I think they're going to be a really tough
Yep.
outcome the playoffs.
And you know what else you mentioned briefly was Devon Taves.
Yeah,
I think that's huge. I think it's kind of under the radar,
yeah, it
but
is.
he's become one of those guys, almost like Jacob Slavin was a couple years ago, where he was very quietly starting to become a really solid defenseman,
Yeah,
and then it took some time, but over his the start of his career, people said, "Whoa, wait a second. I mean, this guy, he might not be the flashiest, but he is a huge part to this, in his case, Carolina team, and in Devon Taves, now the Colorado Avalanche." And I think a good, solid, well-rounded defenseman like that can go so far in helping an organization that I agree. I don't think they needed that big, flashy Taylor Hall move. I think getting a guy like Devon Taves, re-signing Andre Burakovsky, re-signing Adam Graves, I mean that's basically undefeated in my mind.
yeah. I mean, seriously. I mean, Taves is your fifth defenseman next year. I mean,
And
I mean,
I,
at least if he's number four next year, at least in 2 years he's number five when
yep,
Bowen Byram sort of comes into his own. But I mean, that guy's your fifth defenseman. Are you
yep,
kidding me? Are you kidding me? And you didn't even have to give up any of your prospects because Colorado has a bunch of top 100 prospects according to all the ratings, and they didn't have to trade any of them.
yep.
It's almost scary how good they are. It really
If
is.
if somebody showed me their roster today, 6 months ago, I would have said, okay, that's a good roster, but they must have traded Alex Newhook or
Yeah,
Bowen Byram.
yeah,
And they somehow managed to finesse all these moves without giving up any, what I would call, extremely valuable assets for the future. I mean, but Byram and Newhook, those are the two guys that you hear the most about. And the fact that they have the current team that they do with those guys coming up, it's I'm excited. I really am excited.
So a bad move. I over the weekend. Tyson Barrie to Edmonton. I mean, so the Oilers signed Tyler Ennis, Kyle Turris, Mike Smith, and Barrie for all under $8 million. That's pretty good. And they've all had a lot of success in the league. But what? They couldn't keep the puck out of their net last year. And how the hell does Tyson Barrie help keep the puck out of your net? The guy is a traffic cone on defense. He's going into the exact same situation that he was in Toronto, and he failed. So he's a good power play quarterback. I mean, he wasn't a good power play quarterback for Toronto. He sucked. But so he's a good, I guess he's been a decent power play quarterback, but that's where you're going to go? That's where the Oilers are going to go to improve the power play? Do you know the two guys that are already on the power play? Why don't you spend the money and even the roster spot on some guys that, I don't know, play defense?
Yeah. Um yeah, this one is exactly the same one I was thinking of for a deal that in my mind just I don't really see the benefit to either party here because you already covered Edmonton in saying that this is not what they need. It it seems like it's an attractive player to have because you look at the point totals and you say, oh, that's pretty good for a defenseman. But Toronto thought the same thing, and they're not in the best state right now. They had a very upsetting year. It was really nothing short of a disaster for Barrie in Toronto.
No, it wasn't. Nothing short of a disaster.
No, it was awful, and he became the whipping boy very, very early, as at least one Toronto defenseman always does. And what's funny is, he turned down some pretty solid offers to sign with Edmonton. The AAV in Edmonton for this 1 year is 3.75.
Yeah.
The rumor is he got offered over 6 by somebody.
No way.
Yep.
No
I'm being dead
way.
serious.
No way. That rumor is wrong.
This isn't something that I saw some random person throw out on Twitter. I saw this in several places.
That is...
And
I refuse to believe that. There is no friggin' way that Tyson Barrie got offered $6 million. No way.
Right,
no.
Well, I'm gonna pull this up. After we're done.
They might have
this out if you want. If it turns out to not be true.
They might have. No, I mean, people might have tweeted it, and that might have been the rumors. But there is no way in hell any GM, unless they were literally on crack, offered Tyson Barrie $6 million. No way.
Well, point of what I'm saying, I feel like the Oilers are trying to flex on that by saying, look at how much of a great price we got this guy at. No, I'm still not impressed. You got somebody who has everything that you already had and nothing that you need. And people are saying, like, oh my God, this power play is going to be incredible. Well, they were already really good.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't get 2 goals for scoring 1. The goals are going to mean just as much. It's just like, you and I, we talk about how teams, they need to identify their need and tend towards that. And it just seems like Kent Holland, being the experienced GM that he is, this one is just, to me, one of those moves that it seems attractive because he puts up some points, but it just doesn't cover anything that they need.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, what does this do? You were Swiss cheese defensively. You got a guy that's a traffic cone. He can play on the power play. Sick. That's great.
I got it pulled up, Tim, right now. It was Frank Saravelli from TSN.
What do you say? What was the tweet say?
Word for word. Tyson Barrie turned down more money elsewhere to join the hashtag Oilers, including a $6 million offer. That's Frank Saravelli
crazy.
from TSN. So somebody out there, apparently, to use your words, did in fact hit the crack pipe before free agency began.
I think somebody might have told Frank Saravelli that too, and it might not have been true. I mean, I'm not trying to bash this guy, but I mean, the rumors were that the Bruins offered Torey Krug 6.5, and they didn't. So maybe it was a similar situation. I just think that, I mean, you've got to be nuts if you're giving that guy $6 million. Absolutely nuts. But okay.
Yeah, they must have. It's almost like whoever it was that offered him $6 million, they just looked at his point total and they based it strictly off that.
Yeah,
because
or probably what the point total in Colorado too.
Yeah,
not even last year. They just conveniently didn't look at that tape.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm excited to see that Edmonton power play go to work. I think it'll be cool watching them work it around. They'll probably
it's always cool,
unbelievable, but
it'd be cool if I was playing defense.
They're gonna let in a proportionate amount of goals in my mind because Barry's gonna screw up enough. I mean, that's how I see it.
You can't win games 6-5. You just can't.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't. So I don't. A lot of these moves that I feel like a lot of these moves that we've talked about, I'm just like I don't know. I just don't know what they're thinking. But
what's funny is because it's the Oilers also kind of inadvertently communicated that they're okay with their defense by sticking with their goalies. They kept Mike Smith and Koskinen. So apparently in their mind, they said, okay, now that we have Tyson Barrie to shore up our defensive core, we can sign our goalies. And
Oilers fans got to be pissed. They got to.
Oh, they are. They are. I heard in particular they were very upset about the goaltending situation. How they just decided to re-sign
bring everybody back. Yeah,
with Koskinen. And look, to me, in terms of the defensemen in and of themselves and their 2 goalies, this has to be one of the weakest defensive teams, but it's funny because they're also one of the most top-heavy teams, which is just, it's not a recipe for success in the NHL.
No, it's not. So
That's all I got. You got any more bad trades? Or bad
no, that's
moves?
about it. That's about
All right.
it. So one of the all-time great goalies, a part of the Edmonton Oilers dynasty, the Oilers that we just talked about, the dynasty, I think it's safe to say is over. But he was part of the 80s dynasty. Hall of Famer Grant Fuhr. But his only Vezina, which happened in 1988, if you look at his numbers, aren't too great.
Yeah, so look, sports are changing all the time. If you watch any sport now, whether it's a Major League Baseball game, NFL game, whatever, you'll notice that things have changed. The athletes are better than they are today. They have techniques down. If you look at a baseball swing from 30 years ago, it's different than it is today because it's more of a science now. But in my mind, I think the position in all of professional sports which has changed the most dramatically is that of the NHL goaltender. And if you just, let's start with the eye test. If you watch a game from the 70s or the 80s, the goalies love to just stand up and kick a low shot. They would just kick it away like it's a kickball. And they had all of these techniques that, they thought worked for them at the time. But now we see in the NHL, they have the butterfly. They're so good at cutting down angles. We look at a game from the 70s or the 80s and we say, man, what were the goalies even thinking? It's almost like they just hadn't figured out anything about how to stop the puck. And you can see that change in the statistics. So as Tim said, I'm going back to 1978. This was another Edmonton Oilers Stanley Cup win with that dynasty team. Fuhr in net, Curry, Gretzky, Coffey, Messier, the list goes on. And don't get me wrong, Grant Fuhr had a good career. He had a great career. He's actually in the NHL's top 100 of all time, that surprised me, but they, felt that he was qualified for that. He won, I believe, 5 Stanley Cups, all with Edmonton. And after his days in Edmonton, he went on to play in Toronto, Buffalo, Los Angeles, St. Louis, and ultimately Calgary before retiring in the year 2000. So, his best year, at least in the eyes of the people who vote on the Vezina, came in 1988. But the ironic thing is, if you look at his stats in comparison to what we see today, man, it's a little bit different. So let's break this down. Grant Fuhr won the 1988 Vezina with a 3.43 goals against average and an 881 save percentage.
Jeez, that's. I mean, that'll get you yanked now.
Well,
881. That will get you yanked from the net.
You would have a tough time finding a backup job in the American League with those stats.
Yeah.
Even if your save percentage was 901, that's still really not up to par with what you want to see today. And then he lets in almost 3.5 goals a game. I mean, and the funny thing about all this is they won the cup, so that just speaks volumes to Gretzky and Messier and Coffey and all that they did on the offensive side of things. But what's interesting is this was the last time that a goalie had won the Vezina with a save percentage under 881, and it's the last time. This is the last time that a goalie has won the Vezina with a save percentage under 90% and a goals against average north of 3. And again, it was way north of 3. It was a 3.43. His record wasn't even outstanding. He had a 40, 24, and 9 record. But it's almost like Gretzky, Messier, the whole team, the success of the Edmonton Oilers, I wonder if they just felt obliged to give him the Vezina that year, because at this point, if I'm not mistaken, this was their 4th Stanley Cup out of 5 that they won in the span of 7 years. So maybe they felt friendly to Grant Fuhr. Maybe they felt it was his time, because we see awards are often done on narrative. But for whatever reason, he got the Vezina in 1988. The next decade or so would really be dominated by Patrick Roy, Dominic Hasek, Ed Belfour, and Martin Brodeur. But Yeah, I'm real glad to see Grant Fuhr got his one Vezina in 1988, albeit with an .881 save percentage and a 3.43 goals against.
Yeah, yeah. That's really those stats are really telling about what your theory is, that there's no position in sports that has changed more than the goalie. I can see it based on
Yeah.
that, him winning the award alone. So some breaking news which happened in our recording. I didn't see it till now. Alex Pietrangelo to Vegas, 8.8 times
Whoa.
7, so it's official.
You just broke the news to me.
Yeah, I figured I did. I figured I broke it to you. It happened about 40 minutes ago.
Okay.
So I think
So, I mean, the speculation was that that's what would
yeah,
happen.
that was a speculation for sure.
I heard that they flew him out on a private jet and wined and dined him over in Vegas.
Yeah, that
I
would
mean,
do some convincing.
Once you hear that, in combination with the fact that it's already a contender, it's Vegas, he's signing there.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, one more time, what was the number on it?
It was 8.8.
Times
8.8 times 7.
Oh, so
That's
they
a
got
lot.
him for,
That's a
he's-
lot.
Okay, so he's a Golden Knight.
Yeah. No
He's
doubt
gonna
about it.
most likely finish his career in
Yeah.
Vegas.
But
Okay.
it was funny because you talked about earlier free agents going to Buffalo. Talk about going to Buffalo or going to Vegas. I wonder which one players are more likely to choose.
I saw someone, they said I feel like Taylor Hall was telling his agent he wanted to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and he misunderstood him.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, he only went for a year, so maybe he just wants to go to the cold. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think we'll probably get into that more on the next episode. A couple of corrections. I call Craig Smith Carson Smith. Carson Smith was, of course, the Major League Baseball relief pitcher. Pitched for the Red Sox for a while. Well, I don't know how long he pitched for the Red Sox, but hopefully Craig Smith is a little bit better than Carson Smith. Dylan, I believe you said Adam Graves, Ryan Graves. Not sure if Adam Graves has any relation. He's played for the Rangers in the 90s. And that's about it, I think. I'm sure listening back, we'll figure out more things, but those things just, I didn't know, came to my mind. But
You are right about the Graves thing. I apologize for that.
no worries. I didn't want to correct in time because I didn't want to throw you off. I figured it would be a good thing to go over at the end of the show rather than in the middle of a thought. Because hearing that you said the person's name wrong or year wrong can just throw off everything you're trying to
I
say.
understand.
And your point still was able to come across, whether or not you called him Adam, Ryan, Jim Bob.
Well, it was an exciting week for hockey. I always love free agency. It's, as I've mentioned before, some of my favorite days for hockey happen off the ice. I love free agency.
Yeah, it's really
I love
fun.
the draft, which maybe next time we'll get into the draft a little bit. But
Yeah, maybe some winners
it
or
was
maybe
an
some
exciting
good
week for
picks.
sure. What was that?
Maybe some steals of the draft.
Yeah, we can absolutely get into that. I love to break down the draft. I think it was a good one. Lafreniere just put the pen to paper today. You hear about that?
Yeah, he's wearing number 13.
I didn't even hear that. Wow, okay.
Yep. So, got anything else before we call it a close?
No, I'm looking forward to hopefully an eventful summer around the NHL. I think the situation with the economy has kind of put teams in a situation where they have to do some things. So for fans, I guess in certain cases that can be a good thing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, we will see what happens. So if you've made it to this point in the episode, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. You're not watching. This is a podcast. But thanks for listening. And we'll see you again in the next episode.